Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I really struggled to make a part two follow up video to my Tradcon versus Red Pill video from last week. And there's just been a lot that's happened in this last week. I've been just watching on Twitter, Pearl, Myron on one side, and Chase and Tradcons on the other side, just viciously attacking each other. And I've been trying to keep tallies of this, keep notes of it, but essentially it boils down to Chase and the Christ Pillars basically calling Red Pillars degenerates and no better than feminism. That's what we saw last week. That continued into this week. Then you got Pearl and Myron on the other side basically saying, hey, the Christ Pill is not going to solve this problem. And it just went on and on and on. Eventually, I myself got involved. I even got some responses from Chase on some of my tweets. So I'm going to share those with you, but I'm going to start with a back and forth between Myron and Chase just to kind of highlight what's been happening. And then as I end this video, I found a good, few conclusion tweets written by a professor, which kind of describes the situation well. So let's just get into it and buckle up. This is Myron officially responding to Chase. You think women worked since the 60s to regress, give up feminism, and to follow the Christ pill? You're as delusional as the women you debate. The reality is these modern women aren't going to give an inch. Why would they stop behaving the way they do when they are absolutely rewarded for doing so? They can get simps to still give them traditional treatment while still behaving like whores in their peak years. They can get the best of both worlds with zero work and society incentivizes and rewards them for doing so. Women can pretend to be tradcons, then switch up at the last second and go back to feminist tactics and use divorce to destroy a man. The only way to deal with this is to adapt to the new normal because it's never going back. So this pretty clearly encapsulates the red pill perspective on this issue. Now, Chase, in response to that, basically said, this is a man telling me that women are permanently in charge of civilization and there's nothing men can do about it. What the F? Guess the only thing we can do about it is give up and engage in degenerate promiscuity. So that's Chase's response, which pretty much sums up the Christ pillar perspective. As much as I believe that Chase is pretty idealistic in his approach and, the Christ pill isn't really going to solve this problem, I do have to give him some credit with highlighting something that is a weakness of the red pill. The red pill doesn't have a long-term answer, and this is something that I've criticized the red pill about before. Here's an example of a tweet from Rollo Tomasi. Rollo wrote a book called Rational Male, and he's sometimes referred to as the godfather of the red pill, and he's been involved in, the red pill since it was just a primordial soup just in the dark corners of the internet. So you can, say he's one of the founders of it. He put up a tweet, and I responded to it. And I responded in the comments basically saying, Red pill only provides ways for men to increase short-term options, but unfortunately there isn't a solution for a long-term option without the man exposing himself to the system in that way. Only worth it to get married if she makes as much or more than you. Smoother divorce. And I said this, and it was pretty challenging, and I was challenged back on it. So here are the responses. Costello responded, how does the red pill only provide ways for men to increase short-term options? What a weird and inaccurate thing to say. And I responded to him and said, hi, red pill isn't fighting to change family laws. Just help men thrive in current climate. Marriage isn't recommended. Here's Rollo at 402 saying we are still trying to figure that out.
If marriage isn't recommended for guys today in our gynocentric social society, what options do we have? We're trying to figure that out still, Zuma. If you want a family, just hope to find a girl who's okay with not getting married. Thanks for all you do. That's technically the way we are doing it right now. I am not against marriage. I'm against the way we do it now. And if you feel compelled by religion or conviction or ideology or just your poor blue pill sappy way of thinking, at the very least, go in with both eyes open.
Costello responds and says, the red pill can't fight anything. It's a praxeology. It just is. Any talks beyond that is folly, if you ask me. I responded saying, I think MRAs were focused primarily on fixing the long-term aspect, and red pill is more concerned with creating solutions with women that are ultimately short term. If laws aren't changed, no real long-term solution for men exists that incentivizes men to marry. And this has been a thought of mine for a while, because a lot of the red pill prescriptions, at least from the more popular podcasters, like Fresh and Fit would be one of them. But, this kind of goes into Andrew Tate prior to him disavowing red pill, which did happen. But it always centers around self-improvement. And the idea is, as long as you continue to improve, your prospects with dating will go up, which is true, and that's fine. But from my perspective is that the more valuable you become, the bigger target you also become. And the reason I believe that was because working at a child support office, after seeing thousands and thousands of cases cross my desk, there was a part of me that really understood that the more successful someone was, the harder they got punished by the system. And it just seemed to always be more painful. So the problem is that a person can increase his attractive qualities. He can attract these women, but the minute he decides to really invest in one of them, whether that's through marriage or through having a child with one of them, he then becomes very vulnerable. And Red Pill doesn't really offer a solution to that. So in response to my tweet, Rollo actually responded, which I thought was pretty cool. Rollo said, men's rights activists failed because they were top down rather than bottom up. Every social initiative needs to start with the man himself. Change the man and you change the world. And I responded to Rollo. I said, Rollo, I think men need to band together to make actionable legal change. A man improving for himself is fine, but we need to turn Red Pill into a political movement to create legal change. The energy is there, but the leadership isn't. MRAs are needed. So the reason I bring this up is because for a long time this has been on my mind, and I know that this is a problem that's been brewing, because for the last few years, all you see in the manosphere content is, the kind of meta about like pointing out the delusions of the modern women OnlyFans girls or the high standards or all these kinds of things. And the prescription is usually self-improvement and all this kind of stuff. And that is, to be fair, that is the more recent iteration of Red Pill, which is, as Rollo calls it, mostly bread and circus. So I don't want to say he's the one who's been prescribing that exactly. It's just whatever the popular understanding of it is. And I'm just trying to shift it to something that's more political, legal in nature. However, the prescription, again, is bogged down by these problems that I just outlined, which is that the higher value you become, the minute you decide to fully invest into someone, you are now extremely vulnerable. So this is why, I want to give Chase some grace and be charitable to his point of view here, is that he's saying, well, the red pill isn't really giving a long-term solution to this problem. And the red pill is basically saying, well, Tradcons haven't given a long-term solution either. And we're adapting to the new norm that is feminism existing in our society. So following this is when I decided to get a little bit more involved in the conversation. Chase had just appeared on Rich Cooper's show, The Unplugged Alpha, and he discussed the Christ pill with Rich Cooper. And I made sure to watch the episode because I'd been watching these tweets flying back and forth all week. And I'm like, I got to hear what Chase has to say. So Pearl put out a tweet and she says, praying for me, quote unquote, won't fix a system that allows women to falsely accuse men of rape, take their children, their assets, and their reputation. What's your plan other than screaming, take the Christ pill on podcasts? What have you done? I saw that tweet and I responded to Pearl and said, he doesn't have a solution, Pearl. On his podcast with Rich Cooper, at the hour mark, he literally says he doesn't know squat about family law. And I made sure to include the clip.
Reforming divorce law, family law in general, the way that it operates, is a more significant movement towards something that's going to encourage guys to wife up them hoes.
Dude, I completely agree. Look, I'm 28 years old and I don't know squat about family court and divorce laws and how all that stuff works.
I saw that and I'm like, this needs to be called out because, both sides of this are just focused on the wrong thing. The red pill side is focused on self-improvement, which is good in itself, but it doesn't solve the marriage family creation problem. Chase on the other side is worried more on the front end, the spirituality of it to get people together. And he's selling that will keep people together. But we haven't seen that be the case. I mean, the Tradcon message ultimately has been unsuccessful because we ended up here in the first place. I then go on to say that right there alone is enough to disqualify him when it comes to providing a solution to these problems. He hasn't even done the required reading on this. Tradcons think we have a marriage problem. We don't. We have a divorce problem. He needs to familiarize himself with family law to better understand this. After I said that, Pearl actually reposted my comment on her timeline, so it got some more exposure. And Sovereign Bra Chase, him in the video, who's been leading this Christ Pill charge, actually responded to what I had to say. Chase responds to my comment and says, now include the part where I asked Rich to explain to me the many different aspects of how family divorce law is rigged against men. Oh, wait, you aren't going to do that because you aren't intellectually honest, are you? And he kind of gave, a smug face there. Here was my response. I said, hi, Chase. I don't have to include that part of the clip. You asked Rich Cooper for examples, and at 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 5 seconds, he literally gives you some examples. He provided an example of the child support calculator tables giving women an incentive to leave. The point of my comment was to show you admitting you aren't familiar with family law. I'm glad that you asked Rich because it demonstrates you are willing to learn. But the fact that you aren't familiar with these things and are professing to have the solution is extremely concerning. The Tradcons need to work together with Redpillers to make legal change possible. If you continue to lambaste and shame Redpillers for reacting to feminism, you will only hurt Tradcon interests in the long run. You will push the Redpillers away from the conservative voter base to the other side of the aisle if they feel they aren't being heard by your side. Family law reform can only help to protect Christian marriages by disincentivizing divorce, but to achieve this, you need more than Christians to support the change. I suggest that you focus your efforts on family law reform instead of alienating Redpillers. Keep this in mind, Sovereign Bra. Men tend to vote more conservative and women more liberal. If 10% of those men decide to abstain from the vote, or worse yet, vote liberal, the Republicans will lose the election. Redpillers can hold Tradcons hostage if they start asking men to not vote until either your party or the Democrats present a platform for family law reform. It better be your side first that does this before it's the other side. Rich Cooper actually liked my reply, which was pretty cool because I like watching the show. But the point I'm trying to make is that they both don't have a solution. They're both focusing on the wrong thing, and that family law is really the biggest problem in between all of this, And I brought up the election because it is true. I mean, if you look at the numbers, men tend to vote a little bit more conservative. Women tend to vote a little bit more liberal. And there's a growing amount of men who are frustrated, who are still on the conservative side, and they are becoming red-pilled. If the red pill unifies, they can hold the Conservative Party or the Republican Party hostage by asking men to abstain until we get some kind of platform to change these things. Now, after this comment, the next day, Chase actually put a tweet which I thought represented a little bit of growth on his side and maybe a little bit more of an open mind. Name the laws that need to be changed and let's do something about it. We have a ton of influence. Millions of people care about this subject. Change will take time, but it's possible. And he actually tagged Rich Cooper and Dr. S. Baskerville, who's a professor, I think, of political science. Your input is welcome here. Let us know what the law needs to look like so family divorce courts aren't rigged as heavily against men. Rich Cooper did reply and provided a list of family laws that needed reform. Abolishing alimony, custody, false domestic violence, division of assets, adjusting child support. His list was interesting. I didn't feel it was specific enough, but I did leave a comment adding paternity fraud and discussing changes in no-fault divorce law because, in my opinion, we can't just abolish no-fault divorce because we had problems with at-fault. I've discussed that on my channel prior, but the main thing I'm trying to get across is that I'm glad that this conversation, or at least some part of it, is turning towards these bigger creators focusing on what laws to change. Because if we're going to help create a long-term pathway that incentivizes both men and women to get together, to create families, then we need to adjust family law, which is fundamentally a secular thing. You know, those laws are under the umbrella of the state. It's not the church. So it has to be done with more than just one religion. You know, we have people of all different stripes here. We have Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus. Heck, you even got Satanists around here. You got atheists. And all these people have to be able to figure out what divorcing or being married looks like. And unfortunately, it's not as easy as saying just let the church handle it, because the law of the land needs to apply to everybody. Here's another post by Rich Cooper saying, you want men to man up, take on a wife in marriage, fix the laws. And then you have Pearl, take the Christ pill, won't happen until family courts change. So what are you going to do about it? Can't wait till it's your number one issue instead of crying about me and Myron on Twitter. And I, for one, would love to see that be the number one issue in the manosphere. There is a lot of frustration out there, and these creators have a lot of influence. If we can put a platform together to give us something to actually ask for as far as changes go in family law, then everyone can begin demanding that, and we can actually take the steps to start lobbying Congress and politicians in order to get something going. As far as an actual list of specific law changes, I gave a list to Andrew Wilson, who is a relatively new creator I've noticed on the scene, and I believe he's an Orthodox Christian. So I think he is, you know, you can say he's Tradcon. I don't think he's Red Pill, but he's a really good debater, and his show's pretty entertaining, so I like to watch it. But he put a tweet, a men's rights advocacy group, which only focuses on men exclusively, with a war chest for Capitol Hill lobbying and localized lobbying. That's the plan. So that's his plan for change, and I like that plan. I then asked Andrew, hi Andrew, what specific laws will this men's rights advocacy group seek to change? Andrew responded and said, I'm going to do it because I gotta. I think I'm going to have to write this one out with the political goals of such a group. So I responded with a few suggestions. I don't want to hold you up, but I'll read them here because I don't want people to say like, hey, why didn't you suggest anything in this video? So these are my suggestions if I can get, you know, a kind of dream list going on of changes. Maybe I can make a few suggestions to get you started. Number 1, paternity. Men should have first right to dissolve paternity status between him and a child if he discovers a child is not biologically his, regardless of the child's age. The woman should then be required to use the child support agency to go after the real dad. Currently, a lot of states have time limits for challenging paternity. California is 2 years, for instance. I think this should change. And if you look at the California Family Code and you look at the sections that involve paternity, you can see it right in there that if you're married and your wife issues a child, you are automatically the legal father of that child. Paternity is not an issue. It's established. You're the dad. There's no question about it, even if you're not biologically the father. The fact is you're married. Now, if you start to have doubts, the law specifically says you have to have an action filed and served before that child is age 2 in order to challenge this paternity status. Okay, so if the paternity is already established for a child and you haven't asked the courts to undo this before the kid's 2, it's too bad. It doesn't matter if you're not genetically the father. If you found out, you know, the wife cheated on you, all right, and the kid's 7, the court's going to say, too bad. The kid knows you as dad, and you're on the hook, regardless of whoever the real father may be. I personally think that should change. And it's not just California. Many states have these limits. So that was something that was suggested by the federal government. And a lot of states enacted these things. There are variations in different states, but this is California specifically. Number 2, custody should be taxpayer funded. I say this because child support is currently taxpayer funded. Men often have to pay child support and alimony while they are fighting for custody. After paying for support, it's hard to have money left over to pay for a private custody action and pay a lawyer. If our nation cares about fathers being in their children's lives, there should be a legal pathway that helps them do this that isn't just in the private family law sphere. Now, the important distinction here is understanding that there is a difference between the public family law system and the private family law system. Most people don't even know what this means. Something like the federally created child support system, which is funded with federal tax dollars, is a public family law system, okay? Something like custody court is still located in the private family law system, meaning you can't just walk into a child support agency and get taxpayer funded dollars to pay for all the legal work that's going to get you a child support judgment. You have to pay out of your own pocket to ask the court to give you a custody order. And this is hard for men who, the child support agency's quick. If you got a job, if we know you're already the father, we can get a court order saying you need to pay this, and we'll start enforcing it, within months. So now you find yourself fighting a divorce, already paying child support, probably already paying alimony if the court's ordered temporary spousal support while the divorce is ongoing. So now you're paying these two things. You have to pay a whole new set of bills because if you're not living at the house, you got to live somewhere. But then if you want custody, you have to now, hire an attorney and then pay all these private court fees in order to get your custody. So in my opinion, if we already have a publicly funded child support system, well, then we might as well put custody in there too, so at least men can go there and say, hey, I want custody, and they don't have to have all this money in order to be able to get a custody order so they can be in their child's life. Caps on spousal and child support that is determined by the specific jurisdiction of the family. There should never be $20,000 a month child support orders, let alone alimony orders that high. If someone leaves a marriage citing no fault, they shouldn't be entitled to the provider's lifestyle. And I've discussed this on my channel before. We've gone over different notable child support cases like Tyrese Gibson, Britney Spears, Kevin Costner. There's a lot of big ones out there, and my idea has always been that someone, especially if someone leaves like no fault divorce style, or you guys were never married and there's no actual problem, but you guys can't stay together, then I think child support should really be determined not by the guideline, the calculators we have in place, but by how much it actually costs to provide for the needs of the child. Even a $5,000 a month child support order is pretty high, but I think there should be some limit. Number 4, I know most would like to go back to at-fault divorce, but there were issues with that, such as collusion. I think we must keep no-fault divorce, but it should be changed to reflect that the person who chooses to exercise a no-fault divorce must forfeit their claim on alimony, the marital assets, and forfeit first dibs on custody. So I don't think people should be forced to stay together if someone, says I no longer consent to be here. They should be able to leave, but if the other person hasn't done anything wrong, then you can breach the marital contract. However, that doesn't mean you get to take everything with you, or you don't get to, force the sale of the house. You don't get to get alimony. You don't get first dibs on custody. You're leaving the situation. So I think there should be adjustments in that regard, and I'd love to talk more about that in the future. So I gave Andrew this list because, hey, maybe if he really starts this advocacy group, I'd like to do whatever I can to help out and maybe get this changed in the right direction. I'd like to wrap this up with 2 more tweets. One is from Dr. Stephen Baskerville, who's a professor in politics, and then also another one from Andrew Wilson, who kind of did a good job of giving tweets that kind of gave a kind of bird's eye view on this whole situation. So let's take a look. Dr. Stephen Baskerville says, as I make my review of Arthur Millick's book, Up from Conservatism, available for the general public to read, I see parallels between the criticism I make here and the recent drama I've seen stirred up on Twitter over the past few days between the religious right and the quote-unquote red pill. For those not aware, influential creators such as Sovereign Broad, that's Chase, Unplug FitX, that's Myron from the Fresh and Fit show, and Pearly Things, have argued over the proper cultural and behavioral prescription for men concerning the state of their women and the institutions that enable them via a top-down gynocentric order. On one end, you have Christian influencers like Sovereign Bra, who say that we must return to Christ if we ever have a chance of correcting the course of civilization. On the other hand, you have red pillars like Pearl, Myron, and others who essentially say, so what's the plan then? And they have a real point. If all the capital, laws, and institutions are in the hands of the feminists, then what are the tangible material steps that need to be taken to return to Christ? Lecturing on podcasts can only take one so far, after all. However, I see parallels between the arguments of the seemingly dissident conservative class found in Millick's book and the Red Pill creators. Jesse Merriam writes, Americans have largely lost the disciplined will and virtue to engage in Republican self-governance. Restoring an ethos of self-governance may seem an impossible task. Scott Yanor laments that family decline at this point seems inevitable and fated, sewn into the American regime, and indeed the modern situation. These sentiments seem to be in the same vein as when Myron says we as a society are not going back to the 1920s, or when Pearl hearkens the point that telling men that God and religion will save them from the wrath of modern women is leading them down a path of destruction. Of course, the sentiments ring true and should be fully engaged with in good faith. As I point out in my review, the conservative establishment does not go hard enough in its critique of the modern judicial system and its injustices against men. As a result, they cannot offer a viable solution to the legal and cultural ills of modern society. But likewise, the Red Pill space does not seem interested in mounting any kind of resistance to the decay either. They seem more interested in adapting to and living within the feminist order, as its power and influence is simply far too overwhelming to be combated. The problem that lies therein is that there is no long-term solution. See, we're back at the no long-term solution here, and then this is the back and forth I had with Rollo. If we as a society are interested in perpetuating and building upon civilization, then we must invest in the prosperity of future generations. And if we are interested in the future of our progeny, that directly correlates with maintaining the fabric of our civilizational building block, the family unit. If the Red Pill space is truly abandoning all hope for that vision that many Westerners share, their pitch to modern audiences can only be judged to be equally ineffective as the Christian conservative right. He makes a lot of good points there, and I think he does a good job of describing the situation we're in. In my personal opinion, it's not going to come, the answer isn't going to come from one or the other. And it's in the Tradcons' best interest to work with the Red Pillars in order to craft a solution. If they continue to alienate the Red Pillars and they say Red Pill is the same as feminism, they risk pushing the Red Pillars towards the feminists and the progressive liberal side. And if the progressive liberals provide some kind of platform that's, created under the ideals of progressive liberalism, the Tradcons won't be happy, but the Red Pillars might take that offer. All right, and I got one more tweet to share, and that's from Andrew Wilson, who has his channel called The Crucible, which is really interesting. And he gave a similar tweet in the style of the good professor here, but probably a little less academic. Pearl isn't an evil person. I've met you both. This is getting carried away. Pearl's frustration is she doesn't believe Christians are offering up solutions, but just avoiding the main problems, and well, to be honest, she's kinda right. Fighting Myron's message of hump 50 women so you are equally yoked isn't gonna lose to dunk this whore's head in holy water, and that's the truth. Like it or not, we need to be honest here. We are offering up a narrow path, filled to the brim with duty and responsibility, where you are mercilessly attacked by the demonic and constantly fall short of your own morality, and have to acknowledge that over and over and over. To the shrill screeches of immoral accusers, that's the promise of a fulfilling but difficult life. Very difficult. Myron is offering up to screw 50 broads, then settle down. Which message do you think is going to be received better? We are the grandma with the fig Newtons in the cookie jar. Everybody wanted to go to the grandma's house with the chocolate chip cookies, not the fig Newtons. So unless we can start offering up counters to their actual rhetoric and real solutions, considering they all rightly believe Protestant weakness enables all this, then we are going to fail. This game of influences isn't a boxing match, it's a back alley knife fight. When the chips are down and you are surrounded, you'll be damn glad you have your friends like her who don't run out the back door. There are as many full of shit Christian influencers, every bit as bad as some of these Red Pillars who are protected and not purged either. We can't hold the double standard to their community. I will keep taking the fight to the Red Pillars, but I will be honest about what they are saying. I will be honest about its appeal, and when I wreck the ideologies promoting it, it will be with better solutions which they can't refute. Put this away and just reach out and talk to her, man. I get you are pissed off, but a conversation can cure a lot of this. These aren't evil people, they are just wrong, but it's on us to prove they are wrong. Also, and let's face this hard fact, this is the internet. We aren't that important. None of us have any more power than any of our viewers, and sometimes far less. Even if we had the answers to solve the problem, that doesn't mean we even could. And that was in response to Chase, to Sovereign Bra, who's been in this contentious duel with Pearl and Myron and the other Red Pillars. So that is the update. That's where we are currently in the Tradcon and Red Pill war that was, initially started from Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro. You can even arguably say that the first shot of this was Rolo's vasectomy tweet that ultimately led to his showdown with Destiny and Sneeko on the Fresh and Fit podcast. But I'll keep watching this, and I'll try my best to try to steer this conversation in the direction of reforming family law, because ultimately I think that's the answer. And I hope to see people unite under that banner and come to an agreement. Because if we can agree on what laws specifically need to be changed and argue those points, I think we can actually get that ball rolling. And people say, well, that's going to take a long time. It's going to take 20 years. That's true, but I think if people see that there's a real platform being pushed out here and it's gaining steam, that might actually incentivize people to want to get married now, even though the laws aren't actually changed, because at least they see change might be coming not too far down the future. Anyways, if you made it this far, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'll see you on the next one.